on
That's
your email?
what I did. That's what I did.
Oh,
But you need to, okay, I'm going to log off and come back in. But please, Leroy, call Claudia. She's struggling. She didn't receive the same email we received because she read to me what she received.
On est
Hi,
live là.
everybody. Hi, everybody.
Madame.
I'm Lucilla, and I am from the South African Fashion Week, and I am here to welcome you. I'm your hostess for the evening, and I'm here to welcome you. We have 367 attendees tonight, and we have 33 countries represented here this evening. I'd like to just introduce you to, or before I actually start, I'd like to thank Omuyemi from Lagos Fashion Week for pulling this African group together. She is the one that made the call. And then thank you to Adama for starting this journey, I think a few years ago. With a vision to create a group or a consortium that can speak fashion in Africa. So I'm going to ask my co-hosts, and I say co-hosts because, you know, women, we all do everything together. My co-hosts to introduce themselves, and I'd like to start with Omuyemi. Omuyemi?
Oh, okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Omoyemi Akerele. Yeah, I live in Lagos, Nigeria, and work for a company called Star House. We're a fashion business development agency. And one of the things we do is Lagos Fashion Week. But beyond that, we work, I'll say our work cuts across different aspects of the fashion industry. One of the things we do and we're passionate about is providing opportunities for skills development and capacity building for employability in apparel manufacturing in Nigeria, which we do effectively through SHF trains. And we've been able to train over 800 people. We have over 800 beneficiaries who in the last last 2 months have been able to rise up effectively to be able to contribute to the production of PPE and other relief material for COVID-19 in Nigeria. One of the other things we do as well is through our network of either designers and collaborators across the scene is Fashion Focus, which is our talent discovery arm. And we've done this since inception in 2011. It used to be called Young Designer of the Year, and now it's called Fashion Focus. Some of the brands that have been through that include maybe your Orange Culture, Ejiro Mosafiri, Kenneth Ize, I Am Isigo, quite a few Nigerian brands have been through that platform, but it's evolved into what we call Fashion Focus today. And about 2 years ago, we launched a fund called Fashion Focus Fund, which is quite rare in an industry like ours to be able to reach out to private sector in Nigeria to contribute a pool of money that we make accessible in the form of a grant to some of our beneficiaries. We've also, as a company as well, we do quite a bit of work with advocacy because I believe in the power of conversations. I believe in the power of talking. I believe, that it's very important to be able to have cross-sector conversations to create change. So we do this effectively through Fashion Business Series, through Fashion Focus Africa. We do this effectively through something we've launched recently as well called In Conversation With. And of course, there's our Access to Market initiative, which has purely been focused on providing opportunities for brands and designers that we work with to gain access to market, not just within Nigeria, but Pan-African collaborations and of course in other parts of the world. We've worked, and as we speak, we even have a pop-up going on in London with designers, not a pop-up, like a concept store called Koi Bird that's been on regardless of the pandemic. And lastly, we have Lagos Fashion Week, which a lot of people are more familiar with. And through Lagos Fashion Week, the whole idea has always been to bring people together to be able to provide an opportunity for them to show and showcase their work to buyers and press. I use the term buyers loosely because we oftentimes, that part of our work, we do it before Fashion Week through showrooms in Paris, through activations in Las Vegas, through pop-up stores and partnerships in London and just different parts of the world, and of course in other African countries as well. So I think that's me, or that's us in a nutshell. That's what we do, and I'm excited to be here today. I see a lot of familiar faces, I see friends, and thank you for bringing us back together again. I'm hoping that this won't just be a conversation that is going to lead to change. It's going to lead to us pulling together our individual strengths to be able to create the future that we hope to see. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Omuyemi. We are waiting to connect Claudia, so we'll go to Anna.
Oh, okay. Well, hello everybody. Thank you, Lucilla. I'm very happy to be part of this group and to be able to present myself and the work we're doing. My name is Anna Gitana. I am the founder and creative director and managing director of African Mosaic. And we are primarily an export-oriented design and manufacturing company, but we also provide a platform for young and emerging designers. We launched an incubator program 3 years ago and working in establishing the future generation of Ethiopian designers. We also have an integrated center where we share our workspace with other designers to collaborate and work with us. Our design philosophy is based on three pillars: source, design, and develop in Africa. So we do source primarily from the continent, leather, cotton, etc. We develop local talent, and we also manufacture locally. I am happy to be part of this group. I'm coming to you from the heart of Addis Ababa on Mescal Square. I'm actually at the Hyatt Regency Hotel, who have been very kind enough to allow me to use some space here and good connectivity, so I'll be able to join you throughout this program. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna. Gloria.
Hi, I'm Gloria Ovamuno. I'm the founder of Kampala Fashion Week, which is probably like the baby fashion weeks that are going on. Kampala Fashion Week is under the umbrella of the Uganda Fashion Council, which I'm also a board member. Our mission has been in the past 7 years that we've been in function to motivate, inspire, and create artistry around, amongst the local community of designers and artists. With that, we have created seminars to educate the audience because of our educational system not being as developed as it should be for the global market. We have also during KFW, we have pop-up shops to have other artists who might not showcase, but also be able to present an audience and find buyers, because we believe networking is very important to growth. As well as a seed project, which is kind of like Project Runway, where we source locally around the region of Uganda, as we're based in Kampala, to find artists outside of Kampala and to promote and support and mentor them in the process of growing their businesses, even in their areas. So yeah, that's just a bit about what we've been doing here. And thank you for having me. Very excited to be part of this conversation. And yes.
Thank you, Gloria. Thank you very much. Adama.
Hi, I'm Adama Njai. I'm Senegalese, and I'm the founder of Dakar Fashion Week, and also founder of other event. I started something called Black Fashion Week in Europe. We started in Prague, we did Bahia, Montreal, and France, and just to make it short, I started concept stores called Sargal in different cities. Paris, now we have Paris, Casablanca, and Lomé. And yeah, been in this industry for 18 years now. And I'm so glad to see all of us together. And I'm pledging for, you all know it, for African Fashion Federation, or the council that we work on creating. And I also created a TV channel called Fashion Africa TV, which is in Bouquet Canal Plus for the Francophone one. Voilà.
Yeah, thank you, Anama. We're still waiting. We are still waiting for Claudia, and when she comes on board, I will introduce her. But now I'd like to say thank you to our panelists. Thank you for your time. It's really, really appreciated. And I'd like us to just do a very quick introduction like we've done now, starting with Nelly.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nelly Wanji. I'm based in Paris. I've been in the creative industry for almost 11 years now and focused on the continent for the last 7 years. In Paris, I conducted several initiatives to promote African creativity in Paris. I had a gallery that I had to close because of everything going on. I also have an online platform, and I facilitate for creative to go to places where they can actually meet with their potential clients. So I organize pop-up store. I bring creative also to trade fairs. And the last trade fair we went to was Révélation, which is more focused on accessories and home decor. So regarding fashion, I had a lot of designer that I actually promote through the platform Moonlook that I launched 4 years ago. And we're working currently on launching an upcoming pop-up store, maybe by the end of the year or earlier in 2021.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nelly. Serge?
So I'm Serge Carrera. I'm the head of Emerging Brands Initiative at the Fédération de la Haute Couture and La Mode in Paris. Actually, we are obviously our main role is to support all emerging brands. And as you know, in Paris, we are lucky to be an international platform for brands from all over the world. And we have recently admitted and promoted some African brands, and we are very pleased to be supporting this new generation that is emerging and that is bringing also a new view on African design and African creation.
Thank you, Serge. Karen?
Hi, everybody. My name is Karen Downey. I've been in the fashion industry for an incredibly long time, and I've absolutely loved every minute of it. I was buying director for Topshop at the time when we started to sponsor the New Generation Awards. So I was instrumental in taking care of the designers that we actually onboarded on the New Gen panel. And then obviously we worked doing collaborations with them in the store. I then went to ASOS and I was fashion director for women's wear for ASOS. And again, there we did quite a lot to support initiatives with upcoming designers. And also we launched something which was called ASOS Africa, which was actually a project with Kenya, in fact. And when it started, it was a very tiny, I think there were 3 people involved with it, and it grew and grew till we had to build a factory and employ lots more people. And it's still going today. It's very exciting. Then I left there and did some consultancy work and then started a new brand. So I've worked across quite a lot of different areas of the fashion industry, and I'm delighted to be here this evening.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you very much. Eddie?
Hello, everyone. My name is Eddie Marquez, and I'm here in New York City. I've had my own wholesale agency, branding and marketing agency here in New York City for about 15 years. My past experiences, I was responsible for launching North American projects for McHugh by Alexander McQueen and Coming Soon by Yohji Yamamoto. And then on a more commercial, broader base, I still manage James Purse for North America and also internationally, but I still have my boutique agency here in New York. My goal with my agency was to take all of my expertise from sort of the bigger level of fashion and and introduce it to some of maybe these smaller, more creative, emerging per se brands that don't have the exposure to proper setup initiatives and relationships with the retailers and sort of the what to do and what not to do to build your business into an actual business. I don't think fashion is a hobby. It's a very, very lucrative business, and we all have a lot of passion behind it. And I think that there's a lot of misconceptions about how vital this business is. It is a business, and I take it very seriously, but I also have a huge passion for the creative people that are involved in it. We're all taking a big hit right now, but you know, I'm pretty excited about seeing what the next chapter is. And I think this group that's been put together is very exciting to see what our next steps are. So I'm looking forward to hearing everybody's voices during this time. So thank you, Lucilla.
Thank you, Eddie. And now, last but not least, Ruthie Orlin. So I want to tell you that Ruthie Orlin was one of the finalists of the New Talent competition in 1998 at the South African Fashion Week. Yeah. Ruthie, over to you.
That long ago. And I remember it was very, very exciting to be a part of at the time, because we hadn't had that before. It was the second year, wasn't it?
It was the second year.
So it was very exciting to be a part of in this country. I'm a jewelry and accessory designer. I was the jewelry designer at ASOS under Karen Downey, which was a very exciting time because we really got to break boundaries and kind of do what we wanted to at that time. And now work together with suppliers creating collections for the high street in London on various different projects involving bags, hair, jewelry, belts, and key rings, and pretty much anything that we can come up with. So also delighted to be here.
Thank you. So before we carry on, I'd just like to take you through the format of this evening. So we are posing 4 questions. We're posing 4 questions, and we're going to start with the panelists first. So we are posing a question, and then each panelist, in the running order that we've had it now, will give us their opinion, and we will take questions. We will start with the panelists, and then we'll go over to the African team, and then we'll take questions on each. So the first question is, why should the world be interested in African fashion? And I would like to Nelly to start and just give us your opinion, then move to Serge, then Karen, then Eddie, and then Ruthie.
Okay. So basically, I'm going to speak from experience because with the gallery, we had the gallery on Faubourg Saint-Honoré for 3 years. And thanks to the gallery, we have encountered a lot of customers who were buying a selection of creative African designers, emerging designers mostly. And for what I've learned from them is that most of the customers who are looking to change a little bit what they're already buying from, like they don't want to go to the main venues like department store that we all know, or buy from the big brands, because they feel these brands are all over the world. And when they're looking to buy something more exclusive, more rare, they will look for African designers because they know that African designers are not yet out there. And I think that that's something designers should really focus on, because today on the international market, a lot of them are standing as more authentic than all the top brands that we know. Some of them are also transparent about the fabric they're using, because a lot of young designer, emerging designer are still using traditional fabrics. They're weaving at home locally, and they're also telling a story about sustainability, because they're also including those issues into their creativity process. And mostly because the creativity from the continent is very unique. When you look at the global offering of fashion, what Africa has to offer is very singular, it's very unique. And I think that's what the world is looking forward to know more. And the customer that we know today, that's mostly what they're looking forward to have more creativity, more exclusivity also, and mostly unique stories, stories that they know that they will not hear elsewhere.
Serge?
Yes, I think that what is interesting is, as you said, it's something that is different. And actually what is, I think, this interest into the African fashion is also due and pushed and promoted by the fact that you have a new generation of designers who are able to combine this heritage, this cultural heritage of Africa, and to melt it and to mix it also with a vision of modernity, and to be able to go aside from craft, but to turn this craft into designs, and to integrate it also within a cultural background. And actually, I think that what is interesting is to see that fashion is part of culture, and actually the whole culture is in Africa, which is completely moving from cinema to music to photography. There is a real cultural movement in Africa, which is promoted and embodied by a new generation of creative people.
Thank you, Serge. Karen?
So I think, well, just to say that one of the main reasons that I left ASOS was actually because I felt that fashion has become far too homogenized, and it was losing any kind of individual creativity. And I think that the general fashion model internationally has not really been working very well for designers for quite some time. And I think that now, in spite of everything that's happening at the moment, I think it could be a very exciting time, because I think everybody needs to go back to the individuality, the creativity, and showing the skills that actually seem to have got lost along the way as fashion has become a much more commercial and massive business, I suppose. And for me, fashion was always about identity and giving a sense of kind of yourself and representing your best self. And I think that more than ever, we're fascinated by that at the moment, and Africa does offer a huge diversity of cultures and traditions. And I think now could be a very exciting time for that to be highlighted and showcased all over the world.
Thank you, Karen. Before we move on, I'd like to just introduce Claudia. She's just joined us. So Claudia from Ghana, there she is. Hi, Claudia. Welcome.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, Claudia.
There's Claudia. Okay, we move on to Eddie Marquez from New York.
Thank you, Lucilla. You are all touching on a point that we talk about a lot when we're in our appointments with a lot of the buyers. And if you speak to any of sort of the, from the big fashion directors or the market editors or any buyer or any merchant that I've met that's had stores for over 20 to 30 years, they all make the same point, and that is that they got into this business because they want to feel like they're discovering something. They don't need to be hand-fed everything. They like to go in and feel like they're discovering new talent and new designers, and it's becoming harder and harder to discover that because our world has become so homogenized. And I do think Africa is probably one of the few places left that because it's so big, but I don't think it'll lose its identity if it gets some commercialization and some broader business internationally. I actually think that there's so many cultures, so many diverse cultures within Africa, that I think it has a real shot of becoming sort of the next big place, but in a much more interesting way, just based on the diversity. So I think it's a very interesting time to look at Africa.
Yeah, indeed. I absolutely, and I think we absolutely all agree with you. Ruthie?
I mean, much the same as what everyone else is saying. I do think there's a lot of innovation in this country. And I think that perhaps we haven't had the platform to show that, but I do think that everybody is so done with all the sort of over catering that's happened in this industry for so long that I do think there's a real need there for something slightly different, something that makes people kind of, you know, excited again. So I think it's, nobody knows what is going to happen, and especially during these uncertain times, but I do feel positive that I do think people will just go back to wanting some form of individuality. And I think that's the only weapon that we have to differentiate ourselves is individuality.
True, absolutely true. So before we carry on, we go on to the African team, I'd like to just pose the question again so that it's fresh in our minds. Why should the world be interested in African fashion? And we start, and that is from us. So this is what we feel, you know, why should the world look at us? Omoyemi?
No.
Omoyemi? Adama, can we go to you?
Oh, okay. It's actually, I think that our panelists say what I want to say. I think that our fashion been so unique in so many kind of ways. The way we use fabric, the way we use textile, the way we also tell our story to fabric. Like for instance, like in my country, probably in Ethiopia, in a different country, clothes is not only a clothes. A clothes is a story. It's an heritage. It's so much more than a clothes. And I think that that uniqueness of our fashion is something that we haven't had the opportunity to show. We haven't had the platform like Ruti say to really showcase our fashion, and that uniqueness is really something that people are looking for nowadays with everything that's happening, and also we've been sustainable for so long, and now it's just the trend that people talking about ethical and being trained. And I remember growing up, during my grandmother used to wear headscarf, and we used to also weave. Like when I went to Ethiopia with Anna, we have the same weaving technique, but the weaver are different. So there's so many richness in our culture, and fashion is not only fashion is part of our culture, and that's why I think that people should come and look at and share what we have to offer. Yes.
Absolutely. Omoyemi, you want to come in here?
I think for me, what we've, which is similar, I guess, I'm probably going to be echoing what a few people have said, but what we've consistently tried to share with people about fashion from the continent. I mean, African fashion is subject to so many interpretations, you know, so sometimes it's hard to, is it fashion that's from people who are of African descent, people who are on the continent, you know, how do you know, it's fashion, right? But for me, what we pretty much try to preach is that the continent is vast, you know, when it comes to natural resources. And, you know, when we think about our heritage, similar to what Adama was saying, thinking about skills, you know, the skills, the craftsmanship, the artisanship, you know, that's what truly, really, really makes fashion from the continent unique and special. I mean, it's that whole intersectionality between our heritage and, you know, what's been passed down from generation to generation to modern silhouettes and modern shapes, to create something that's truly beautiful. I mean, I think within the continent is one of the few places where you find that people still work with their hands, where you can actually still you can actually still answer that question, who made my clothes in 2020? You can pretty much trace it. You can go to the person who's done all the weaving for the clothes. You can still touch and feel it. There's some sense of tangibility. There's some sense of it definitely evokes a sense of more than just I'm wearing clothes. It speaks to the history, it speaks to the people, it speaks to the processes. And why wouldn't you want to think or talk or talk African fashion? It's beautiful. It's luxury at its best. And even when it's not trying to be luxury, the fact that you have a group of people who are working together, trying to create clothes that it's meaningful not just to the person who's wearing it, but people who look after people that really work for them. So nothing's essentially lost in translation. Everything is still, sort of guarded and protected to a certain extent. So yes, I mean, it is beautiful, and this is a story that we've tried to preach for the last 10 years since inception with the platform of Lagos Fashion Week, to showcase that craftsmanship, to showcase heritage, to showcase, to be able to look behind all of that fashion, to look at the people who made the clothes, to be able to, let the designers be at the forefront of telling that story of their team, the people who make up their communities, and yeah, to be able to see where we've all come from. And yeah, the magic that we make using fashion as a tool of communication, because fashion can change lives. So I guess, I don't know if that answers the question. I just jumped back in. I was out for a second, so I'm hoping I answered the right question. Okay.
No, they say you could answer any question. If a question is asked, you just say what you want to say, and then it's fine. So don't worry. You're okay with that. So Claudia, just from your side.
Hi everyone. Do you want me to add on to what Adama and
No, we want to just answer. We would like you to, in your opinion, why should the world be interested in African fashion?
Yeah, I mean, if you are not interested in African fashion, then what would you be interested in? I think African fashion. It's the time for African fashion, to be honest with you. It's just the culture, the colors, the originality, the stories behind it. I think, the world has got into somewhere that people were looking for something like that. People are looking for things, just not clothes, but they are looking for clothes that has meaning to it, clothes that has a story to it, collection pieces that, is ethical and things like that. So I just feel like it's just the right time. And, people, designers and people we work with in Africa has always looked forward to having this attention that the rest of the world will look at them and not just see them as African designers, but just see them as designers, So, yeah, I mean, I would say that why not pay attention to what is happening here? Because it's been happening for years. It's just unfortunate that Africa never used to be a continent that people will look for when it comes to fashion. But I think with a lot of people changing the narrative, all of us, what we're all doing, changing the narrative, passionately showing the world that we're more than just, what people see on the news and things like that. I think it's changing something to the extent that now people are paying attention to our food, to our fabrics, to our fashion, even our hair look. So I think it's just the right time, because now there's attention to the continent, and there's also a moment for the designers and the creative people to seize this opportunity and use it to our advantage, and to also to create more jobs and make more impact with what we can do and what we've been doing for years.
Thank you, Claudia. Anna, can we go to you now? Anna? Anna from Ethiopia.
Yes, hello. So I thought a lot about this question, and I think obviously the obvious is the world should be, and the world is interested in African fashion. I mean, we are, after all, this is the cradle of mankind. This is where it all began. There is a huge inspiration, and that could be drawn from the continent. I think we have really influenced and inspired a lot of international designers. Obviously, somewhere along the line, perhaps homage hasn't been given back to Africa, or there hasn't always been this recognition of where these inspirations have originated. But Africa has always inspired and continues to inspire. And I think those in the creative industry continue to be inspired from our music, from our art, from our food, and etc. I think what could be also very important is that we on the continent also realize the amount of contribution that we have made for international fashion. Because a lot of international designers have borrowed, and perhaps we on the continent, especially emerging designers, tend to feel that they need to look to the West to be inspired, or look to the West to understand at what level they need to work, whereas right here on the continent, they can, there's just so much that they can draw from, and that they could also be part of this international fashion circle, this international fashion inspiration, because we have really contributed a lot. In the 20 plus years that I've been in the industry, I've really sort of come to the realization that there is a lot, we just have to build awareness. And if you're not on the continent, or if you're not out there talking about it, then even the youth here do not realize that we can contribute and continue contributing as well. So there is, I think, even when you look at what's happening now with body art, scarification, tattoo, and all the different kind of art forms, and that you see borrowed internationally by international designers, perhaps modified, fused this in different ways, it originates from Africa. And so it's just the story hasn't been told, and there hasn't been, that link hasn't been created directly. So I think the more we talk about it, and the more we have build awareness on the continent internationally, then I think you know, we will be able to step up to being part of an international fashion arena, where we will be able to present African fashion in its context, in a modern version, but it doesn't have to be an interpretation that has maybe traveled around the world and then come back to us in a different form. So, and obviously I agree with what everybody else has said until now. I just thought I'll bring in another perspective.
No, fantastic. Thank you, Anna. I just want to do a comment here from Udwok. Isn't it amazing, all these fantastic words and names, wonderful names, that says, I resonate with Anna's point. It is not enough for the West to look at our fashion industry. We also need to realize the immense value our fashion continent and Africa diaspora design creatives have contributed to the industry. And it's exactly what you've said, Anna. We have contributed hugely, but we don't claim it, and that is very, very important for the future. We're now going on to Gloria. Gloria is our last African team before we move to the next question.
Hi. I mean, Anna just touched on a lot that actually I wanted to say, where it's like the world, you know, the question being the world being interested in African fashion, but I mean, it has been interested because it's been inspired and it's taken a lot of resources, you know, by history. I think we already all know the facts of what's been going on in the past. So now I think with the, maybe it's time for its voice to really be heard. I mean, from so many people who are in the continent, it's time to expose and hear the voice from the African fashion industry, to, you know, develop from our challenges, to be able to feel comfortable and open to also further explore our own cultures and our own heritage. You know, I'm also a designer, so having that experience to know, and then also having the privilege that I studied abroad, furthering my design, you know, education, but knowing always, because I come from a background where already my father's side, I'm from 2 tribes, you know, the Nyankole and the Baganda, and like taking that and putting it into my work. And I feel like that's exactly what now as African designers, why it's going to further our voice, so people know what's going on here, is us as the designers and the creatives to express ourselves. But of course, the challenges are the doors and the networks that will also help expand and grow our space. And I feel like that's also what's been lacking: the funding, the networking, to allow us to then expose ourselves more, because it really is about us being also deeper in wanting our own fashion and expanding it throughout the continent, because I'm only here working in Uganda, but I want people from Kenya to South Africa to, you know, Ghana, Nigeria, Senegal to actually even be buyers and expressing and sharing each other's cultures to further, to further grow what is the African fashion. So but everyone has to.
Yeah, that is very important. I have another comment here from De La Colo, and he says, or she says, thank you, Anna. I believe that's the main problem. We do not support our local industry enough to create attention to the international stage. Serge, do you want to comment on that?
Sorry, before we do that, can I just say something so that we don't? Yes. I think there's, with the way the question is as well, and our response thus far, you know, it's also important to reiterate that, you know, Africa is enough. You know, so yes, there might be this perception that, oh, you know, we're reaching out to the international stage and the international community to save us. But it's for us to also realize that, you know, within the continent lies resources, within the continent lies a market, like an open market to like I mean, the continent is home to how many billion people, you know? So I think it's important that, you know, in reaching out and in, you know, in this clarion call for look at us and how you can help us is a clarion call to ourselves and to our leaders and to like stakeholders on the scene across, you know, from a Pan-African perspective is, you know, help us, you know, let us start from there, you know, like what can we do to strengthen what we have? We've all waxed lyrical this evening about the strength of what African fashion is, but you know what we also need to do to build on that strength is for all of us to realize that, you know, this is what we have within this, you know, within the continent. We have like access to talent, access to markets, access to creative people. You know, infrastructure might not be on that level, but you know, we can look for funding. We can, I mean, a lot of brands are constantly looking to come to the continent, and there's only one reason, because they know that if they extend or expand their footprint, you know, it's going to create more market share for them. So why don't we also ride on that wave as well and create more market share for our creative talents, our designers and all? And don't get me wrong, I'm all for, you know, international markets. We do a lot of work trying to position the brands beyond the continent, but how can we create a world or a scenario where we can straddle both worlds, where every creative, every designer knows that let me conquer home first, you know, let me be present adequately in Nigeria. I've spread across my country, Pan-African wise, everybody knows me. I'm not sure there's any designer or any brand that can, you know, confidently say that, yes, everywhere in Africa, you know, I have footprint across my continent, you know, and then of course, conquer the world. So I think, you know, I apologize for jumping in, but I just thought, you know, it would be good to sort of rein us in quickly.
Fantastic.
And then,
yeah, we want people to jump in, absolutely, and I absolutely agree with you, Serge.
Yes, actually, you are totally right. The thing is that there is a kind of complementarity, because obviously a brand, in order to be rooted really strongly and to be very strong, also to go internationally, has to be connected to, I would say, locally or regionally to the people, and to be strong and to have strong bases. Because actually, what could be missing and challenging for some of the brands, as you mentioned, is to be strong enough to go also internationally for getting new market, for getting the confidence, while the competition is so hard all around the world. So there is talent. Obviously, these talents are expressing new messages, which is fantastic, and new creative messages. And from that, it's also a way to be strong also locally, and then be able to expand internationally. Yeah, but exactly. It's more a kind of, I would say, when, and more than ever, when a brand is relevant, I would say, on a market and on a specific market, if it's really relevant, it means that it corresponds also to a new way of thinking. You were mentioning sustainability. Obviously, a lot of these young, emerging African brands are also reflecting this consciousness on environment, on social responsibility, on labor laws, etc. So it's something that is really keen, and that address, these brands are able to address themselves to a new generation of people, obviously in their region, but also more internationally.
Yeah.
Really true, Serge. And I think one thing that I just like to add is when the focus of any fashion brand, you need to bear in mind actually your customer and who they are, and always keep them totally at the front of your mind. So when we were first starting to showcase ethical fashion in London, people thought it was okay that it was just ethical. And in fact, customers don't want just ethical. They want ethical, but they also want beautiful fashion. So fashion is, I think, a very complicated business, and it's actually about getting into people's minds as well as everything else, and actually, having to make something that is desirable, that they feel will show them in their best light and be their, represent their personality and their viewpoint and themselves truly, I suppose.
So just from the South African side, I think that the world should be interested in African fashion, because we do create desirable clothes that can be worn by the world. We have an aesthetic that is new and that is unique, and that I do feel that moving into the newness of what is going to happen tomorrow, it will be important for people, for consumers, to buy something that they can identify with, that has a story, and that comes from a place that they like. So we are going to be looking for fashion that is more in depth, that is not just take to today and to tomorrow gone. And I really believe that is what Africa can offer to the world. Of course, we should develop locally. That should be our first. But as Umuyemi says, that when we look internationally, we know that we can actually compete to a certain extent. Nelly, what is your comment on this, or your thoughts?
I think that basically it's very important, like we were saying, to focus on what Africa has to offer to Africa first. And the young designer, emerging brand should be able to also compete locally before dreaming on going internationally. But the truth is that sometimes the route to go local, to go even regional, for a designer from South Africa to sell to a customer in Senegal is not easy. So sometimes for some designer, the best route to develop is to go international, and I've seen it with a lot of designers who are not even on their local market. They're basically only selling outside, because the reality also is that in a lot of African countries, the minimum wage is very low. So if you're selling something around 500 euros or dollars, it will be more difficult for you to find your customer locally. So you have to look international. So that's why for those brands, it's really important as well, when they're building up, to think global, not to think only local, to really think about creating a brand strong enough to touch anyone who is sensible to the message they're bringing to the market everywhere in the world. Now it's getting much more easy with the supply chain getting more integrated, having logistic routes from, let's say, Accra to Paris, Accra to New York, Lagos to Paris. It is even much more easy to ship something from Lagos to Paris than from Lagos to Douala. That's the reality also. So I totally understand the point of saying they should think local, but as the local markets are not ready yet. Some of local markets are not ready yet. So my advice to most designers on the continent would be to build international brands from the beginning, to think global, not to think only local. Of course, they will find their customer locally, some of the customer locally, but they have to appeal to everybody. As any brand in the world today is not saying, okay, the brand I'm building now is only for people living in Paris, because with internet, the native digital vertical brands from internet, they're selling everywhere without moving from where they live, So directly from internet, with internet, they can connect to the world. So we have to realize that we're living in an international village.
Yeah.
I think.
Eddie, would you like to come in here, Eddie? Anything from your side, Eddie?
It's interesting, and I think it sort of talks to our next question in terms of stumbling blocks, or because as I said before, I have a fashion wholesale agency. So I have anything that I see from Africa, everyone's been speaking about how much has been taken from Africa in terms of influences in the fashion world. You can look at Comme des Garçons, you can look at Alexander McQueen, you can look at John Galliano. All of these designers and many, many more have always taken influences from many parts of Africa. And when I make my visits to Africa, I'm always fascinated and intrigued by the craft, the weavers, the beadwork. There's so much. But I have a specific need because I work in a commercial business, in that how does this translate for me to be able to sell to my retailers internationally? How can I take this beautiful story and present it to the buyer, and the buyer to be convinced to support the local African business, because at the same time they still have to produce it, they have to present it to their customer where the expectation level is high. So how do I translate that beautiful story of this incredible group of women that have woven these beautiful fabrics? How does that translate into a product that they can sell in their store in Paris or in Japan? Or it's something I struggle with quite a bit. And the other thing I wanted to point out is, as I sell the story. I sell the story of Africa. I sell the story of the people, but that story will tend to go away once they bring the product into their store. The product has to sit amongst all the other designers in that store, and it has to stand up to the same level. And I think it's about education. I think it's about more education about what's going on in Africa for people to understand, and for the broader audience to want to buy into and support African fashion. So
there's a message that came through from Isabi that says, absolutely spot on, Eddie. Creativity without commerciality is just a hobby. I want to know from, are there any other comments from our panelists before we move to the next?
Can I just chop in there for a second?
Sorry.
Okay, Ruthie, then Anna. Ruthie, then Anna.
No, so I just wanted to say that African designers also have to be aware, as with every designer actually, that you have to be adaptable to different markets. Like if we are doing a collection for Canada, it's different to what we're doing for London or for what we're doing. So how much then of your brand identity do you lose by then adapting it to other countries? And if you do want to adapt it internationally, then I think it has to be, we have to redefine it through like a modern made in Africa narrative, so that it is somehow linked in, that it is not too literal, and yet emerge of some sort.
Yeah. Anna?
I just wanted to sort of add on to what Eddie was saying, because I think what I see here is really the lack of awareness of what African fashion really is and what the potential is. And yes, some of it has been highlighted. So now we feel, heavily beaded, heavily embroidered, or heavily graphic, and heavily, what is African fashion? And it's not, it's very broad. So when we promote African fashion, it's the way it's promoted as well. So when we went through the punk and the grunge, I never went through it, but there was a time when a lot of people in my generation were wearing it. I found that the kind of fashion that I couldn't relate to, but that is not also mainstream. It became mainstream because it was promoted to become mainstream. It was endorsed and it was supported, and yet it was very off center for a lot of the mainstream fashion at that time. But I think when we talk about African fashion, we tend to think, oh, it's heavily ethnic, it's heavily this, and it's heavily tribal. So therefore, there is no market for internationally. But I think why not? Why not? If we can go through punk, if we can go through grunge, if we can go through whatever the different types of fashion phases that we've gone through over the time when most of us have maybe gone through it or stayed away. Why hasn't it? Because then I think it's really about this awareness. And I think there's this attachment with, okay, African fashion can never become mainstream, or African fashion would never be at an international platform because we don't know Africa for fashion. That's how I see it. That's how I interpret it. But when you see the piercing and when we see the scarification and all of that, that has become in some kind of a fashion approach. But so I think, you know, the view that there is overall about African fashion is that there is this lack of awareness. We don't all wear print. I love print. I always use print. I'm the first to love what I do, but African fashion is not only print. African fashion is not only head wraps. I love head wraps. I wear it all the time. It's very broad, but we categorize and put into one package. So if it's African fashion, because we, you know, in the 60s, when there was the civil rights movement, everybody wore kente shirts, everybody, you know, looked a certain way. So then from then onwards, African fashion kind of looked a certain way. That's how I'm seeing it. Head wraps, kaftans, etc. However, there are endless amount of designers in Africa that are doing different kind of fashion, their own interpretation, but they get into that international platform by the mere fact that they coming from Africa or they're represented, you know, as an African designer, then automatically it becomes a different story. That's how, just once again, to give a different perspective on that.
Yeah. Hi, Lucille, can I just add something before you move on, if it's okay? Hi, Lucille.
Yes, no problem, Claudia. Go.
Yeah, I think one of our panelists mentioned pricing, and she said that maybe for some of the designers, they have to look internationally because the pricing may be too high for people maybe in their region or in Africa or something to afford them. You know, sometimes as somebody that we work with designers, and I feel the pressure on even established designers to really make it internationally. And that pressure on them sometimes can be so frustrating for them to the extent that they can actually start, like their brand will start going down because they're so frustrated that everybody is saying how to go international, how to export, and that pressure on them. Because even if you look at pricing, sometimes I'm like, how do you even do your pricing? Because you can't just make clothes and just expect maybe a jacket to be the same price as a Chanel. You know, they have gone through what they've gone through to get there. So I think even when it comes to pricing, they really need to pay attention to that, not because you want to go international, so you have to force your pricing to be international pricing. You get where I'm coming from? Because sometimes you can see the frustration with even established designers and for young designers as well. Is really sometimes, you know, sad when you listen to them. You know, these are very young, creative people. But number one, they should understand that a lot of these international designers, they have partners, they have funding partners, they have investors. But here we all know how things work in Africa. Most of us start our businesses with our own savings. Hardly do you find people starting a fashion brand or your own businesses with an investor. So they need to pay attention to all of that. The money that you're starting the business with, don't be in a rush to be the next Chanel, or don't be in a rush to be the next bigger designer that come out from international. As William said, this is Africa. We have millions of people here. The market also, don't be aware that fashion international by season as well. It's seasonal. So are your pieces and what you're doing ready to fit that kind of market? Or you want to make clothes that can be sold throughout the whole year. So it's just everybody needs to pay attention to their business model and not be copying from each other and not be in a hurry that, oh, these designers are selling in Harrods or Topshop or ASOS, so I also need to get there. So all the designers that are listening, you need to be, you know, you need to be careful. What is your unique business model? What do you want to achieve? There's a huge market here. Have you been finished selling in Ghana? Lagos is over 200 million.
And there's this preconception that everybody has to be selling, everybody has to be a luxury brand. No, So even if
No.
we're speaking to pricing and we're speaking to the fact that, let's not forget, a lot of people on the African continent live below a certain minimum wage level. The reality is everybody on the continent wears clothes. So the question is, where is the market? Who are you targeting? So and I often, get so a bit agitated about this conversation because there is a market within the continent for fashion. There is. It just depends on, how much is it? What exactly is it? What are the people buying? It's just like now we're in the middle of a pandemic and everyone is saying, oh, people are not really buying. But the reality is people are buying. So most African fashion brands or designers are focused on occasion wear. But the reality is nobody's really going out. So if you're not going out, definitely everyone has to re-strategize and think, what are people going to wear the most? It's the same strategy. What demographic am I trying to target? How much do they earn? How am I going to be able to target them and therefore create or build products that they can buy? So I'm not saying, when I'm telling you to focus on creating garments or fashion for the continent, I'm not saying you should now, because of that, you're going to scrimp on your quality and then make things at a substandard level. Of course not. You're building factories of the future. At the same time, you're creating products that can be benchmarked with any product on the world, in any part of the world. The fact that you're choosing to sell it in Africa or within the continent, in any of the countries on the continent doesn't mean that it's been made at a substandard level. It just means that for now, based on your brand, based on what you want to do, this is your immediate market, and you want to grow from there and take it one day at a time and just grow from there. And there's nothing wrong with that. So I know, because we've to buttress what Claudia said, there's some brands who've been so fixated on this, and their whole marketing strategy was around that, and invariably they did not build from within. And when you do that, you just realize that you're building on empty. So there's this buzz and there's this, thing about your brand out there, but you don't have a base, and you have to build a base. You have to build a base. You have to build a strong business, but you're building locally, but creating a brand that can be benchmarked with anything anybody can find internationally. And you might be in Lagos today or Accra tomorrow. You might be in Joburg. You can be, Kampala, anywhere on the continent, and anybody can ask to buy something from you, and you can ship anywhere. But there's a guarantee that when it gets to that person, it's been made, from the highest quality, from the most thought of processes, with the most thought of products or material. And I think that's a fashion brand that we must encourage people to try to create. A brand that's so mindful of where they're producing, a brand that's so thoughtful of the processes, of the people. You can sell within your local market, but look for a way to straddle both worlds side by side, because the international market is going to come calling. And there's so many brands we can think of. I mean, who grew exponentially within their local market before they made it on the big scene. I know that, this is the digital age and technology and all of that. So you might actually be in your room today in let me think of in Cape Town, and tomorrow you're selling in New York. And that's fine, but that's because you're prepared. In your factory, you already have, or whoever produces for you, everyone's prepared, and you have your own pricing model and everything to succeed on an international scale. But let's not get carried away. Let's encourage the brands to build gradually and to create like a strong base for them to be able to launch from. I mean, think about the pandemic. Imagine if a lot of our brands were relying on like a global distribution system and things were stopped. We would be, right now we're trying to, pull up, trying to get everyone back on their feet. It would have been worse, but now a lot of people operated pretty much like a made to measure operational system or direct to customer. So the effect of not that we're not feeling the effects in terms of spending and funding and all, but from being, having that huge stock that you currently find yourself with because you have like 200 suppliers across the world, is not something we're currently struggling with. So I think it's important we build and take it one day at a time, really.
Thank you. Thank you, Omoyemi. I think before we go to the next question, I'd just like to read a comment from Giovanni. He is from Lagos. He says, and you probably know him, Omoyemi. He says, as a retail manager working for 2 years in Lagos, Nigeria, I can tell there's a lot of potential. Now we need to storytell this enormous background and sell it worldwide. So with that, we're moving to the next question. we're going to start with our panelists again, with Nelly. What are the stumbling blocks for Africa to break into the international markets? Now, I know a lot of us have sort of touched on this, and of course we are building locally, and of course we have to focus on local, but tonight's conversation is really going around the international markets. So what are the stumbling blocks for Africa, as you see it, and how do we break into the international markets should you wish to? So Nelly.
Well, I think there's a part on for a brand to look at international brand that Omoyeni well pinpointed, is the fact that you have two main stumbling block category, I would say. The first one will be internal. Is your organization structure in a way that you can produce and respond to international demand? That's the first point. Do you have the funding necessary to invest in the machinery, in the team to respond to international demand? That's the second. And are you ready to speak the language of international? Do you understand the little nuances that could be in a market like Paris, or in a market like London, or in New York? Because there are nuances. So you have to be internally aware of those differences in those different markets. And the second category of stumbling block would be definitely external to your company. So first of all, when you come to international market, you need to position yourself, because you're coming to a market that is saturated with so many things, so many offers. So you have to be able to stand out. You have to be able to be telling a compelling story that's totally different from what we already are having on international market. So you have to have a unique value proposition that's going to hit right where maybe some competitors are missing the point. That's the first thing. Then second, you have to be aware of the tariff and trade, because when we go international, even if internet make it seem easy, you're still crossing frontiers, and you're still have to go through tariff and trades. You have to go to a lot of legislative issues on local markets. That would be the second thing. And I would say the third and biggest point would definitely be the market nuances on international market. It means if you are based, let's say you're based in Accra and you're producing for international market, people who are buying from you in Paris are not buying the same thing people in London are buying. So maybe you should have a strategy of selecting where you want to go, because you cannot go everywhere at the same time. You have to select your destination, your target markets, and you craft a go-to-market strategy that's going to hit right the spot in those markets. And I would say the last point, especially for those who are doing clothing, it's going to be the regulation. Because sometimes we think that there aren't any regulation. I see still today, even big designers from the continent sending products out without a label, stating the fabric, stating the composition of the fabric, stating how you have to wash the fabric, and take care of the clothes on a daily basis. Those are one-on-one lessons to go to international market. You have to be up to the legislation in all the countries you're going to, So it might look easy, I know, and I think Omoyemi pinpointed it, because it seems easy when you're like, people come to your website, send you email and say, I'm based in Paris, I want your product, how can I get your product? And you just say, okay, I can just ship it through DHL. It seems easy, but then it's gonna get stuck at the customs here because you didn't fill just a form. So I think there's a lot of education.
Yeah.
Also, we have to prep the designers, because going international is not that easy. It might be simple, but it's not that easy. And the international markets are open, but at the same time, they're very codified. So you have to be able to bridge the gap, be able to be in connection with people on those markets who can facilitate for you through maybe activation events, or maybe a showroom, maybe an agent. it might look like it's not necessary in these days of internet, but it's still very necessary. You have to connect through a showroom to get into more, maybe let's say shops and stuff like this. So that would be my take on it. I think we need to, the designer have to be more prepared. We need to educate them more on what it means to go international. What are the investment required to go international? And you don't just go like that. You have to be very well.
I think very well put. Thank you, Nelly. Serge?
I think that just to continue a bit on what Nelly was saying, I think it's a whole supply chain in a way, because obviously you can have crafts, artisans, but it's how to turn these crafts and these artisans combined with the creativity into also an industry. And it's the main shift, which is obviously to structurate it and to make it able to be turned into an industry, which could be from the development of the product. And actually, just to go back to what we said previously, there is obviously no scale, you know, not all brands have to go abroad, you know. Some people can develop a very small brand, just a kind of workshop that is for limited clients and have their own audience, you know, this for sure. But also there are some brands and some new designers who could have a message that is addressed to the whole world and which is able to address a kind of view on behaviors and on attitudes that can say be addressing itself to the whole world, and it would be a shame to restrict it. So aside this message, this creative message from a designer, the crucial point, but actually it's not just for African designers, it's for all designers all around the world, because they all are facing the same issue. It's how to be developing and having a kind of industrial base, from fabrics to garments to technicians, to adjust a perfect product that is reflecting their creative message, but which is qualitative and which can also be adapted to all the world.
Great, thank you, Serge. I just want to read a message from Shanine Coles that says, let me just go up. Shanine Coles, it says, well stated, Nelly. There will definitely be a different compliance, legalities and quality protocols in different countries and states, which is very important to ensure that as a designer, you are fully educated on. So then from Adwak again, big stumbling blocks for designers trying to go international: lack of solid business infrastructure, lack of basic legal foundation and infrastructure. Nelly, that is also what you and Serge were touching on. An all blanket approach without clear data of entering the market, with nothing to show that the target market will actually give a return on investment. So there it is, spot on. And now we go to Karen. Karen, that is for your turn to comment.
Well, I think actually Nelly and Serge have both done a very good job, and the comments from the audience. But I just, one of my observations of being in the fashion industry is that actually it is probably one of the most difficult industries in the whole world, because people who work, my ex-husband used to work in logistics, and he was like, oh, it's so difficult. And I'm like, well, logistics is just a very, very tiny part that makes up the fashion industry. And I think that any designer, whoever and wherever they come from, they just have to ask themselves every single question about their business to understand how they're going to get it to market. And the business side of it is so very important, and most designers do stumble because they don't actually understand the whole end-to-end and everything that's required. So
yeah, thank you, Karen. Eddie?
You know, I guess I'm going to speak on a slightly broader sense, in the sense of I'm going to take it from the perspective of the end result, meaning any designer, whether they're coming from Africa or Japan or wherever they're coming from, in my experience, the biggest stumbling block for any designer or any manufacturer has been shipping and has been communication. So if I have a designer that everybody loves and they buy the product and they're excited, the biggest downfall I've always had in every experience is people aren't shipping their deliveries on time. It really puts a sour taste in the buyer's mouth. It's hard for them to sell, to give them enough full selling time on the floor. And it actually ends up eroding your business. And that sort of harkens back to what everybody's talking about logistics, is that if you don't have an infrastructure set up to make deliveries on time to the retailers you've had a partnership with, they will eventually not want to buy you any longer.
Yeah.
It's just the fact. And you have to get, my other point would be communication. I think where designers really go wrong is they get nervous or they get scared to communicate to whoever they're doing business with when something has changed or something has gone wrong. Or, you know, most buyers and most retailers will respond positively if you are communicating with them on a regular basis as to where their business is going with you. You cannot sit back and be like, well, we'll wait until X. Don't wait. It's your biggest mistake is to wait. You have to communicate to the people you want to do business with that you want to grow your business with. And I would say, from my experience, the biggest downfall for most designers is actually shipping on time. It really erodes your business in the long run. So it's a little bit of a boring explanation, but that really is on the business side. If you want to grow your business, because it is a business, you have to deliver things on time. You have to. So.
Thank you, Eddie. Ruthie?
No, I was just going to say on Eddie's point, I mean, it's also a huge problem within the high street, for instance, in London, when you're doing mass productions and shipment and suppliers not wanting to say that something had gone wrong or held up. And so I agree that that's a huge problem as a designer, and having worked from both the designer side and the supplier side, and now both. So it is a problem. I do think I've lost my chain of thought. I had a point to make.
Okay,
and
so I can chip in while you go back. I've got a few comments here, Ruthie. I'm coming back to you. So a few points that Stella Ajije, excuse me, for next time I'll practice while everybody's sleeping. Timing is crucial to business growth, and one key problem designers face. From Matapelo, she says, in fact, rather over communicate. And Udak says, excellent points, Eddie. Okay, Ruthie, to you.
Right. So back to me, and I don't want to lead too much into the next question, but I do just want to say that with the internet being a game changer in the sense that we are so, you know, we have access to the whole world at the moment. That part is the easy part. Self-promoting yourself, being on Instagram, that's the easy part. It is all the, you know, the little stumbling blocks, which aren't so little, like infrastructure and cash. And so I do think as well that if anyone is planning to try to take their brand internationally, that they make sure that they do have some very good investors that can really help them through the process, because with technology being what it is, there are also just so many complicated processes with barcoding and so many different things that you do need quite an investment to take it there.
Yes, I agree with you. Okay, so let's quickly just hear what are the stumbling blocks from the African team. And I think that is incredibly interesting to hear. So let's start with, we only have 20 minutes left before we must wrap. So I really need us to be really, really down to the point, one sentence. What are the stumbling blocks, Omiyemi?
I think for me, to answer this question, I'm going to isolate it a bit to my country, Nigeria. The fundamental problem is we we currently have a system where, from the creativity angle, from having access to a pool of creativity, creatives, that already exists. But the 99% that's left, to be able to ensure that the 1%, and when I say 1%, I'm not saying it's just 1% of of the talent pool. I'm saying everything from looking for textiles, looking for the right fabric, looking for creating infrastructure, opportunities for them to be able to produce locally, to be able, everything else, but the ability to design the samples, which you need to be able to start, producing or supplying on an international scale, is lacking, right? And I'm pretty much sure. I mean, I've been to meetings where someone's called me, oh, listen, we're expecting X designer to have supplied, but they haven't supplied. And I know for a fact that what's probably the stumbling block is being able to get access to the fabrics they need, and at the right time, the right quantity, being able to produce it. And yes, I mean, I've listened to communication, understanding nuances, but I'm talking about brands that have been able to sort of move beyond that. They've been able to communicate at that level and at that consistency where, everyone, they've become accepted, so to speak. But now it's time to deliver, is to ensure that, and that's why we are working. I mean, when we started working in the industry, we started with the creative industry, the creative people. But now we're trying to create a process whereby industry is also empowered. And by industry, I'm referring to the apparel manufacturers, the textile manufacturers. I'm referring to every other person within the value chain that's going to, be able to effectively support the creative talents that we have, so that you can export them. So yes, you might have the best, marketing skills, best Instagram images and lookbook, pricing, everything's on point. But when it gets to the point where someone wants to order like 500 pieces to be delivered in a particular period of time, it becomes a challenge. It is a problem, a stumbling block. And until we solve that, we're going nowhere.
Yeah,
that's it.
Absolutely. Claudia.
Okay. Yeah, I think, all of these stumbling blocks that all the experts have been saying, I think goes to show, or to say that designer, Mr. or Mrs., my question is, are you ready for all of this? Because everybody said manufacturing is a problem, large scale production is a problem. Because when I speak to designers, and as I said, most of them are desperate to get onto the international market. But then some of us maybe will push you or get meetings with buyers. Now Topshop or ASOS will say, can you give me 100 pieces of this top? Now it becomes a problem because they can't get the same fabric. And also when international people are ordering, it might be this top, but they want the same color in 100 pieces, and they want this color in 100 these pieces. And one of their biggest challenge is sourcing the fabric in that quantity to meet the demand. And then they start failing the people, as Eddie is saying, they are not able to deliver on time because the raw material aren't available. They are not able to source for the same fabrics as the demand needed to be. So I mean, for me, it all comes down to, are you ready? Do you have the funding for large scale production? Because we all want to be seen as, oh, now I'm international, now I'm producing, now I'm selling to Topshop, ASOS. But are you ready? Do you want to? And also, mind you, designers, once you go out there and you leave a bad reputation, you're not just spoiling your business, you are spoiling business for the rest of African designers. Because it becomes a reputation to say, oh, I don't want to work with African designers because they can't deliver. But for all you know, somebody's been spending the last 5-6 years preparing themselves so they can order, they can meet that demand. But you in a hurry to meet that, now you spoil it for other people as well. So all I'll say is, like, people just need to be aware that, this market here, international, fantastic, but be ready for it. Because all the standing blocks, copyright, skills, I mean, like, God, I don't know. Yeah.
Thank you, Claudia. That was really exciting, sort of like comment. Anna. Your microphone.
Sorry. So the industrial infrastructure, I think Eddie mentioned that. Logistics, I think that's a huge challenge. It's a huge stumbling block for us. I think there has to be a focus on brand creation, the proper marketing as well. I think as far as what I'm seeing maybe as a potential solution is really to kind of see how we can work collectively. I'm sure Adama will mention later on her initiative around bringing us together under a federation. But I think also on different areas, even with it becomes sharing co-space to manufacture, sharing logistic channels, etc. Because I think if every African design, because we have similar challenges, whether it's South Africa or Ethiopia or West Africa, we have the same challenges. We don't have access to funding, designers don't have access to raw material, we don't have good design schools. We have great raw material, but it's not accessible to designers in small quantities, such as the leather and the cotton and the raw material that's readily available, but most of it is exported, or you have to buy huge volumes. It's very difficult to work within African countries as well. If you're importing, like myself, I love kitenge, printed fabric. It's very difficult for me to source these things. But if we start seeing ways that we can work collectively as a group in the regions or even across the continent, I think we will maybe start seeing at Africa Mosaic, we've created a co-workspace, and we're beginning to work with other designers and sharing our workspace, doing collective pop-ups. We have a festival once a year that brings designers together. We're looking now into sort of creating a common platform, an e-commerce platform, etc. So I think that could be a solution, because I think the access to funding is really crucial. And I think for any designer, even working internationally, if you don't have that support, that financial support, I think it's really difficult to break into the international market.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, and I think that really, thanking Adama and Omuyemi for wanting to start a federation, because the federation will start a system, and we don't have a system in Africa. And if you don't have a system, and if you look at the systems that were created in all the European countries, we really need a system, and we can work together creating that system and rolling out that system. Gloria.
I mean, I think everyone has touched on things that I don't need to repeat, because it's exactly what's been happening. But coming also from a designer, having experienced those things with the regulations, I found the solutions I found, which I pass on to even other designers, I mentor them. Also my own personal studio spaces, I take in young designers where I can give them not only tailoring advice and business advice. I did in also my studies, study business and marketing for fashion, because I knew when I came back, those were going to be important tools for my own business to grow. But like my transparency, I also give my client, which I feel also a lot of African designers need to be okay to admit stuff to themselves, as everyone's saying. I tell people, because of the limited issues with our material chain, I was like, sometimes this is my silhouette, but the fabric's going to change. I only do this and this many pieces, because I also learned I couldn't put the pressure on myself. I needed to manage, I needed to know I'm truly sustainable. And I feel like that's also the next, to unblock ourselves, is to have that honesty with ourselves, which everyone has been saying. And then it has helped my own brand grow at my own sustainable pace, at the same time give my clientele or my audience knowing that I am quite transparent, and to know that this is what they can expect from me, because these are the challenges I'm dealing with. I've also made them work for me so that I can have some form of business, which I also feel like the blocks we are dealing with are sometimes this old-fashioned system, which we as designers need to know needs to be adapted. It's okay, maybe, I know there are different levels from luxury, quality, and to mass, but that these middle ground, other ways to do your business are also acceptable. And then how do you get the education and the support system for that when you're not in any of these other fields, which also I think need to be adjusted, from price ranges to supply systems, because as we're learning, slow fashion is, I think, the future, as well as being aware of your waste and environmentally conscious. And I think that stuff can also affect in then hopefully changing also the legal structures of taxes and regulations that come from all these other spaces when you're trying to export or import.
Yeah. Thank you, Claudia. Thank you very much for your input. Adama?
From my side, I realized, like all of us say, I realized really early stage as a designer that I couldn't have all the requirement, the international market asked for me. So I decided to do slow fashion, just because, like Gloria said, different material. Like this shirt, I cannot have it in 100 pieces. So I, like Eddie, I communicate with my agent. I communicate with little boutique. I choose to just sell to little boutique because those are my target. And because I couldn't make it bigger to Arod or I don't know, Galerie Lafayette or other things. So as a designer, you need to adapt to your skills also on capability to just reach a target market. You know, nowadays everybody wanted to be at Saks, everybody wanted to be sell stuff on luxury. I mean, we can't. It's just a fact. We cannot all go to the wider market like that. So that's advice before I pass on to. That's advice for me as a designer. You can make only 100 or 200 and each piece, but make it different. You need to choose wisely what kind of fashion you want to do. So my fashion is slow fashion, and I'm sticking to that because I want it sustainable. I want it ethical in a way. I want to tell a story. I want to tell where I source. So that's you can break into the international market, but on your own rhythm and comment on dit ça, level and je sais pas comment on dit ça.
And take your time. And I think that should be our selling point now. And that's what should make, you know, fashion from here truly special. That everyone, you know, so no, you probably wouldn't expect the designers to create 2,000 pieces or 5,000 pieces every 2-3 months, 6 times a year to ship to different parts of the world. But we should be at the center of telling that story and communicating it with the world that, listen, what makes this really special? I mean, and when we're not talking about more mass market part of African fashion, is the fact that, you know, it's been hand woven. If it's going to take 6 weeks for your weavers to do that, maybe you've sold out. And that's why the dropship model is working in some parts of the world to ensure that designers can work at their own pace. Because if you struggle and scramble for this market and you know put so much of your investment in it, at some point you're going to have to stop. You know, there's so many businesses who are supposedly lucrative, but if you look into their books, they're not making money. And we don't even have to spend time here, you know, coming up with some of those names that, listen, this is a brand that, you know, probably shows in Paris every year, you know, probably has like 20, 40, 100 storefronts across the world, have stockists, but guess what? They haven't broken even. And that's why direct to customer and build sometimes, you know, with the way our designers are currently positioned to be able to go from pace to pace and take their time, is probably a model that will work in the longer run. But it's hard to communicate this to key decision makers in key stores, you know, to understand that, you know, you have to work with these designers and probably handhold them through the process. And I know people are going to come for me and say, yeah, right, Omoyemi, you think African designers are so special that, you know, every buyer is waiting to handhold them through the process. But the point is, you know, let's take it slow and we'll get there eventually.
Thank you.
I want to continue just one thing.
Adama, you go.
Okay, what Omoyemi said is exactly what I think. As a designer, I choose to go my rhythm. Slow, petite boutique, that's my target, that's what I do. But to the idea of, I come up to you sisters to just collaborate, to create a federation where we can have everything we're lacking in Ethiopia, in Senegal, since even in our different country, we have different way of doing things. For instance, in Senegal, like when I came 18 years ago, I had to build everything by myself. There were no industry, there were no, and in the way we're seeing it now, we had to create the fashion week, we had to create shops and stuff like that. So my idea of like breaking through international is being together. On a federation and a council being together, so we can get funding together, so we can get investors together, so we can get, you know, like Anna is doing a great job in Ethiopia now with her atelier or manufacturer, so we can, you know, I can have my people go train in there. I can have my people go train in South Africa, because Lucilla is really strong on economic, on commercial. So to me, the most important thing we need to do is right now, it's just to collaborate together and get together so we can face challenges together. Voila.
The
Thank you,
united
Adama.
front. Yeah.
Thank you, Adama. Very valid points. I would just like to say that from a South African point of view, we are very lucky because we've got 32 fashion colleges in South Africa, and the South African Fashion Week is in contact with them, and we catch the students that come, the brilliant students that come from there, and we educate them, and we can supply units at very good price points. Of course, we can't compete with Europe, but we can to a certain extent, and maybe that is something that we can look at as a federation. I just want to read two comments from our attendees. Musa or Mosa Makwena says change will come from a policy reforms within the industry. Let's invest in building regional value chains from raw materials to final product and trade with each other. So what is really important is for our governments to actually, because it's policy, it's for our governments to actually understand the power of the creative fashion industries that are sitting in their countries that they're actually ignoring at the moment. Mm-hmm. So in South Africa, the annual turnover of the creative fashion design industry, which is the designers that we've built over 23 years, is over 800 million rand per annum. And it's not acknowledged and it's not supported by the government. So what we need to do is we need to take the focus away, we take some of the spotlight away from the manufacturing and put it on the designers and say that is almost the future. Is building those small businesses in the country so that we can create our own aesthetic. So we can create what Adama, we can choose, and we can do slow fashion, and we can serve our community, and we can play a role in the long run in international fashion. So the next question. Seriously, I've had somebody saying to me, you go over time, but we've got exactly 20 minutes left. So I want a one-liner. I'm sorry, a one-liner from everybody, starting with a panel, one-liner. What are the perception of African fashion in the world? And I want a one-liner, really, Nelly, one line.
That's a challenge. I think the formulation is wrong. We shouldn't say African fashion, because every designer is singular. Every designer is particular. It has his own thing. When we say African fashion in general, we just give an idea to people, and that idea can come wrong, because like if you have a designer from the diaspora being inspired by African culture and bridging it into something very contemporary, then what is it to be an African designer? I think we should say the fashion from Africa, because when we say fashion, African fashion, people are already thinking about so many things that's not helping the designers. So I don't have an answer for that, because the perception, it certainly comes with all the perception people have on Africa. So I think we should stop saying African fashion, and we should say designer from Ghana, designer from Nigeria, designer from Senegal. We should say the name of the designer, and we should push the designer and his story. I know it helped us to say African fashion, but I think we should say fashion from Africa.
Good. We will certainly do that, Nelly. We will absolutely take your cue on that, and we will absolutely do that. Serge?
Actually, I share totally this point of view. I think that the perception is so diverse from a designer to another one. So I think that the perception on the work of Debe Magugu or Kenneth Ives is completely different from another designer, and that's why it's quite challenging to express a kind of overall perception. However, I think that there is really the feeling nowadays internationally, if we take an international perspective, that African designers are ready to be expressing their own view on fashion, and are expressing and addressing themselves to the whole world, and having their own way to bring also something that is keen nowadays, which is to have a cultivated eye, and not just being proposing garments, but to be proposing something, clothes that are making sense, because they are full of attitude, and they are full of also of this cultivated eye besides.
Fantastic, thank you. I absolutely agree, Serge. Thank you very much. Karen?
I think we've kind of all pretty much agreed, to be quite honest. So I rate the same thing. The world perception seems to be too generalist, and it doesn't take into account the size of the continent and the number of countries and the diverse cultures and traditions that come out of Africa. So I totally agree with Nelly.
Great, thank you. Thank you. That is really great. It's good to hear. It's absolutely amazing to hear. Eddie?
You know, from my perspective, I don't think there's enough. I don't have a perception from at least my side, from buyers and retailers. I don't think they have enough education to even know what designers from Africa are about. They have, and part of that is because I don't think there's been enough coming out of Africa for them to even have a grasp of, oh, that's that great group of designers or great group of fashion people that are coming from Africa. From my perspective, my buyers, my retailers, they're open to it, but I really think that it needs a bigger exposure, a bigger PR push, something to sort of give people more of an education of what Africa is about. Because from my perspective, my buyers don't even know anything.
Thank you, Eddie. Ruthie?
I think everything's been covered. I would also say that, you know, there isn't really a platform for that. And I think that if there was overseas, that it would promote a different perception, that we could make a new story.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, great. Omoyemi?
She's not here.
No, she's not here.
Yes,
she's back.
Thank you.
So,
There she is. Okay.
So yeah,
The
I guess
perception,
it's
the perception of Africa in the world.
Pardon, say that again, please.
Sorry, we are on question 3. What are the perception of Africa fashion in the world?
For me, I struggle with that a lot, because I struggle with the question itself and the way it sounds, the perception of African fashion. Because by asking that question, you're fundamentally and immediately putting the power in the hands of people. Because the first question I'm going to ask is, what is African fashion? And that's, you know, at the beginning of this whole conversation, I started out saying, you know, I'm not really quite sure I will go down that route, because is it fashion from Africa, or is it fashion, you know, that's designed by, you know, there's so many connotations, or is it fashion that's been designed by Dior, who was inspired by the continent? And, you know, so many things, the perception. So struggling to find the perfect answer to that is, I'm really going to struggle with that. However, you know, what I'm going to say is, I think the future for us, at least where I stand and where I live and where I work, the future for us, you know, is we have a lot of work cut out for us. And that's in building an ecosystem that can support the creative talents that we work with. Yes, to providing education, infrastructure, yes, to even bringing them together, looking for how to source. You know, I'm not going to pander to the world's perception of what fashion from the continent or from designers from here, or, you know, whatever that might be. I struggle with that, but I won't speak to it. What I know is there's a lot of work to be done, but we can rise up to the challenge. We can rise up to the occasion. It's what we've done. I think what I've dedicated the last 10 years of my career to doing, and even more, which is how can we build on infrastructure, lobby for reform, policy change, create, ensure that we're steering everybody, galvanizing the whole industry. And now I'm talking about not just the creative people, the commercial talent industry, to be able to create, what we are happy can be benchmarked with anything you can find in any store in the world. And if you choose to label that African fashion, then I'm fine with that. However, I don't really think I want to explore that conversation tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. I would really like to give all the other my African team an opportunity, but we're really running out of time. We've got 15 minutes left, and I would really like to. I want to skip the next question. Is internet a game changer? Because we know it is a game changer. And I would like to go to our last question that says we want the panel to the African team to give us an idea of one intervention that they need before I go over to the panelists to give us their last view. So we're going forward to what intervention do we need? And I would like to start with Claudia. Claudia, what intervention in Ghana would you ask for if you could ask for an intervention?
I think for me, it will be manufacturing. Manufacturing is a big deal here. Great talent, but people producing production is a big problem in Ghana. It's something that I'm really passionate about, and I'm trying to work with different people for us to set up like different production plant to serve, not large scale, but smaller production numbers. So I think that's the main thing for us in Ghana. Aside funding and all the other things that people go through, I think manufacturing is a big thing. And if I can just say last one, my perception is the way when designers, when people say fashion from Africa, people expect it to be Ankara. I think we need to move past that. The fashion in Africa is not Ankara. So if we can move past that, for me, I'll be very pleased, because once you wear something that is not Ankara in New York or anywhere, and you say, oh, this was done by a designer from Ghana, they look at you like, oh, maybe they were expecting some animal prints or some blue, green, all mixed with something in there. So I think what we need to move past is designers are designers, no matter where they're coming from. If you are from Europe and you're inspired by Africa, you are inspired by Africa. If I'm designer from Ghana, Nigeria, and I make clothes with plain fabric, that's me. That's what inspired me. So I think they shouldn't box designers into specific fabrics, or box their creativity. They should allow designers to be designers wherever they are. Thank you.
So Claudia, thank you. So Claudia is asking for help with manufacturing. So any intervention, manufacturing is where she's going. Anna.
Okay, so my final call would be to get the SME, the small and medium enterprise ecosystem in place. I think small and medium enterprises in Africa are suffocating. It's very difficult as it is to start your own business. We know the creativity is there, but of course, getting the right support from government, from private sector is challenging. So I think we need to bring not just creatives, but also government and private sector and others onto the same platform to be able to find a solution. Without government, without the private sector, only creatives on their own, even though I think we've come a long way in the 20 years I've been following fashion quite closely on the continent. I think we've come a long way, but I think the numbers have increased, and perhaps we have more fashion weeks, we have more platforms here and there. But how many household names or how many international African designers can we all name or mention? And why don't we know we have talent on the continent? I see it every day, but they're suffocated. They can't survive. They don't have an opportunity to be able to expose their work let alone, when I say international, by the way, and I know someone mentioned international doesn't necessarily I'm not saying Europe or the US only, but even from Ethiopia to Kenya or Ethiopia to Uganda, etc. It's very difficult for us, for designers and who are trying to work on the continent and have an impact on the ground by working on this. So it's really important for government to really wake up and see the only way we can actually build an African fashion industry is if we have fashion designers that are successful, that are thriving. And we know the international brands, Burberry was driven by a designer. Calvin Klein is a designer, and it's a multi-billion-dollar company now. So for us to be able to mention these names down the line, we need to create the right ecosystem for them. And that is not in place now. And what happens is they get burnt out and they end up doing other things, or they're working in factories making t-shirts or doing other things. So, and we're losing a lot of designers. Out of a population of 1.2 billion people on the continent, there's only a handful that we can say, and who are really successful. So I think we really need to make sure that government is listening to us and we're pulling in all the resources.
Anna, I cannot agree with you more. I cannot. Everything needs to start from the government. If the government acknowledges the power that sits within the creative fashion industry on our continent, this continent will be a different place within the next 4 or 5 or 10 years. We've had no government attention on our industries, and that is really a very essential. I want to go to Gloria. Your intervention, Gloria.
My intervention definitely would be and a strong educational system of a school, like from that trains people from marketing to business to tailoring to understanding their taxes and accounting, even to something to support from photography to technology. I mean, and the government support. I mean, we get kind of really drowned by the regulations they give foreign clients or audience that are much more positive than local. Like we can't even sometimes source our own cotton, but someone foreign can come in and take our cotton for half the price and export it easily, and we can't even source like that. So yeah, governmental support and understanding and changing of this kind of corrupt system.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. Adama, before we go to Umayemi, Adama.
Oh, okay. So I have 2 things. Of course, governmental support. Right now, we've been working on this artisanal factory for 3 years. I wanted to bring artisans together in a factory and just do fashion, not copying China or Europe, but do something sustainable and ethical by putting all artisans together. So definitely need support, need money, funding, and our government are really useless. It is frustrating to see that nobody really believe in that. They all know that this is a billion or whatever million euro business, but yeah, we need someone to talk to them. And I don't believe in government, but I do truly believe in investors, our rich people. We need to gather together as a council or federation so we can go and talk to people that have money, that are interesting in developing Africa in so many ways. And I think that that's maybe an angle we need to use instead of talking to government that not listening to us, to just gather together as a force and go and find investors, African or non-African. I'm sure that out there will be people that are ready to listen to us, to listen to our stories, our way of apprehending fashion. So for me, those are the 2 things we need to do, is to create a force so we can be a bigger voice than each other, in each of us in our own countries.
Thank you, Adama. Before we go to Omoyemi, I just want to say that we live on an emotional continent, and I believe that the world is ready to buy into emotion. And maybe that will open up Africa to the world. I just want to read again. Uduak says, agree, Anna. Now let's build on our own fashion lobby groups and engage the government. So important. There's somebody else. Yasmin says, Claudia, loved your comments. Faustina said, Claudia, once again, excellent input, thank you. And then I'm going to learn this, says, preach, Claudia. So well said, Omoyemi. So it's fantastic support that we're getting from the outside world. So now, Omoyemi, you have the last word before we go to the panelists to give us their last impression. So, Omoyemi.
So I know you've asked for one thing, but I think I'll just summarize ours because, you know, Oliver Twist, right? It's a threefold appeal, would be education for us, infrastructural support, and funding. These three, they're inextricably linked, I think, to the next level for designers that we work with. And education is important because, like I said, currently we're operating on 1%. So we're all pushing on the 1%, which is the creative talent that we have. And we've all successfully and unanimously agreed that we have talent abound. However, the industry that we need to support that talent is really lacking. For us to be able to have like a super talented designer make it to that stage, and then we're not able to support because we don't have people with the right skill set across. And I'm talking about textiles, from textile designers, I'm talking about, you know, quality control, like everything you can think of. And infrastructural support, of course, we know what that means. The list goes on and on, which invariably would mean our government gets involved, institutional investors, development banks, and all of that. You know, I won't go into that. And of course, the third thing is funding. We need funding. So the government's been, you know, through the private banks, they've tried to, commercial banks, they've tried to, you know, come up with a series of interventions, but I'm not quite sure they're really working. And yeah, so it'd be great to have a conversation with the right people, with my colleagues in the room, to be able to explore how we can all put our heads together, you know, to be able to come up with the right solutions, because I think this is something we all need in some way, shape, or form. And yeah, I look forward to the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So from South Africa, also, I think that my intervention would be acknowledgement from the government and the understanding and the realization that the future of fashion really depends on the SMMEs in each country, and at least on the short term. So we really need to build our local talent. We need to understand the power of it. That is actually, it is, fashion really has got the same power as electricity, you know, but we don't understand it. We use fashion like we use electricity, but we don't understand the power of it. And I'd really like our governments, all our governments, to understand the power of what we as women and other people in Africa have built, and that all they have to do is actually just water the plant that we've planted, and that will grow. So that is just from me. So now I would like to just a closing statement from all our panelists. And I want to say thank you very much for everybody's time. Thank you again for Omoyemi and for Adama for bringing the group together. Thank you for the African group for selecting me to host this. Thank you for the panelists for your time. It is so much appreciated by everybody, and I'm talking everybody, the people that are attending and the African team. So from the panelists, just your closing thought and something that we can take with us as a group to the next webinar. So let's start with Nelly.
Okay. I think fashion is a strategic industry for any country in any continent. And if Africans, we really believe that this is where we want to go because of the high creativity, because of the culture that we want to share with the world, we should really start consolidating our funding blocks. And I think those funding blocks comes
with, first of all, having a federation. And I think Adama insisted on that. And we should work on that. We should talk to each other more often. We should be more connected to understand the different dynamics that are going on the continent, because they are not that different. From Senegal to Nigeria to Cameroon to South Africa, we are facing the same reality. We shouldn't count on government because it's not going to happen anytime soon. So probably we just have to get, be a united front to do anything we're doing, either at home, either international. We should be a united front. And I believe that the strength each of us have already put into this, if we get all our strength together, we would definitely have more impact. And maybe it's not going to be as we wish today, but at least we will be building something for our children.
Thank you. Thank you, Nelly. I so agree with you. Serge.
So I just wanted to say regarding the state support, I think the state support is more to bring to fashion in general a kind of frame, not to be funding an industry which needs to be by itself a self-subsistent industry, but definitively the role of the states and of the whole players in the industry. And that's quite interesting, what you said about dialoguing and making a federation all together, is to bring the diverse, all the players around the table for education, for building a knowledge that could be shared, for also empowering the crafts, empowering people, giving some models also to people with the most successful people, and embracing the best practice in a way. And this is what dialogue between all of us is bringing to everyone also in a way.
Thank you, Serge. Karen?
So I think really what I just wanted to say is it's amazing to sit and listen to you formidable women, and you have a massive understanding of what you need to do and where fashion is at in Africa. And I just think you should just work together, as Nelly said, and just keep on pushing it forward, because I think you're doing an absolutely amazing job. And it's been a delight to sit and listen to you. So thank you.
Thank you, Eddie. Thank you.
Same, listening to everyone, it's really inspiring to see something that I love and I've been working in for so long, and seeing how there is sort of this outreach happening in Africa and everybody's sort of trying to come together. It's really exciting. It's really exciting to see, and I look forward to see where you guys are headed. And thank you for including me. It's been really, really inspiring to see this. So thank you.
Thank you, Eddie. Ruthie.
Also, it's so inspiring. You women have such strength and such passion, and I just think that you're headed for great things. I mean, it's so exciting to see such strong women in the industry and with such belief in our own country as well. So here, and please continue doing wonderful things.
Thank you, Ruthie. And before I say goodbye, I want to just read a few things from our audience, because our audience has been absolutely incredible. I mean, can you imagine 33 countries represented and 365 people actually listening? So I've got things that says, well said, Umuyemi, preach, Claudia, agreed, Anna. It is just so fantastic. Amazing session. Thank you so much from Fiona. Thank you all from Elizabeth Way. This is an amazing talk from Stella Ajije. Thank you so much. Fabus from Africa is thank you. Michael Johnson, thank you. And it's so incredible. Yasmin, great discussion. Many thanks. This was so insightful as a designer in the diaspora from Janice. Matapelo Casignani saying, loved every minute of this session. Victor saying, you much appreciated. Thank you, everyone. So, I can't, it just carries on and on and on, the thank yous. So from me and from the whole African team, thank you very much to the attendees for your time. Thank you for loving fashion. Thank you for being there for us. Thank you for being part of this incredible community that Adama and Omayemi has just started. So let's grow the community. And thank you to the panelists. Thank you, everybody. And over and out.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone. Bye.
So great to meet all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, Ruthie.
It was amazing to meet you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Keep in touch. Bye.
Bye-bye.